We're buying a deal every month, if not more.
Big picture, break it down on why you did what you did with it.
It was a fun year.
I mean, I'll say within the last probably 8 months, I've sort of changed my perspective.
It all started with that 22 unit, which was the first time I saw six figures sitting in an account.
He is Cody Davis, a dynamic real estate entrepreneur and investor specializing in creative financing.
It was just a matter of you're either going to grow or you're not, and you have to make the conscious decision to try.
That way, right?
Right.
So really cool. I love that you did that. Do you think... What is up, everyone? Welcome back to Diehard Entrepreneur Stories. I am Devin Ramos, your host, and today I get to interview one of the most brilliant young minds I have the pleasure of knowing. He is Cody Davis, a dynamic real estate entrepreneur and investor specializing in creative financing, particularly seller financing. At just 19, Cody purchased his first 12-unit apartment complex and has since built a portfolio of over 100 rental units without relying on traditional bank loans. He now shares his knowledge through his YouTube channel, Cody Davis Business Adventures. He's a wealth of knowledge, especially when it comes to real estate financing, and today you'll hear some of his stories. Cody, welcome to the show.
It's good to see you. It's been a little bit since Tennessee.
Absolutely, man. I know you've been doing a little bit of traveling, right?
Just got back from Hawaii, got engaged. Now I'm back in Moses Lake, Washington, working on the rentals.
I love it, man, and congrats on that, dude.
Thank you. Yeah, exciting next step.
For sure. I said over 100 units, but I'm pretty sure I lost count around like 120 or something. Where are you at right now?
So I got above 200.
Okay.
I actually just sold out of about 70 of them and took that cash to buy up my ownership in the other 130. So I've started buying stuff myself, buying out partners, and I'm continuing to grow the solo ownership side.
I love it, dude. Cody style. Like that in a nutshell is what I know of you. I love it so much, dude.
I'm Cody doing Cody things. That's never going to stop.
That's for sure. So, Cody, I think you probably agree with me on this. There are two sides of knowledge, right? So there's a like knowledge about, knowledge that something exists, and then there's like the how-to part about it. So you did your first deal at 19. Where did you get that exposure? Like, how did you know about it? That's like the first thing I think about, because I didn't even know real estate existed until I was 31. So 4 years ago, 35 now. 4 years ago is when I found out about real estate. I know you knew about it by 19 at least. Like, how? Where'd you get that exposure?
The initial exposure was from high school. I was in a civics class. They were teaching us about torts and Mr. Davies at the high school I was going to. And he said, hey, you don't have to come to school the last day, but if you do, I'll teach you how to make money when you sleep. And he didn't just tell me that. He told every student, every class. Because he owned a lot of real estate, and outside of his teaching career, he was an attorney. He was in that business, and I asked him on that last day, I was like, have you made more money from being an attorney, or have you made more money from real estate? And he said, I made way more money from real estate than I ever did as an attorney. And I thought that was mind-blowing, because in my mind, attorneys made a ton of money, and a lot of them do. So that was my initial exposure. From that point on, I disregarded it a little bit, but I read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I ended up going to a community college. I got accepted to University of Puget Sound, Tacoma. I didn't go there because I didn't want to go into debt, so I went to TCC, Tacoma Community. During that time, one of my dad's friends, contractors, was looking for a helper, and so he referred it to my dad's friend, who referred it to my dad because I needed money. So I ended up helping. I love pressure washing, cleaning up yards. I ended up helping him paint a house on the inside. And I learned about this Facebook group, which was just a local real estate meetup group. And I made a post in there, say, hey, I'm working this job on the side. I'm going to be working at Target, because one of my buddies was working at Target and he made more money than anyone I knew, which is fun to look back on. And I was working at the YMCA as a local gymnastics coach. So amongst all those things, I made that post, and someone said, hey, you can make a lot more money in real estate, which is that real estate topic again. And what you should do is drop out of TCC, come work for me. He was a real estate broker.
Okay.
And so I listened. I came in, met with him, and I decided to drop out of college. It was a very rational decision. That typical 19-year-old, very impressionable. And so I ended up completely changing my career path from going to school for kinesiology to become, get into PT.
Mm-hmm.
And I was studying business as well. Ended up getting my license, didn't sell anything. But what I did get exposed to was there was brokers in the office selling multifamily. It was duplex, triplex, fourplex. I didn't do anything bigger than that until one person did. They got a 22 unit under contract. It was a quad, a 6, and a 12. And they were under contract. It was seller financed in Moses Lake. Some of these things start leading up to where I'm living today. But it was for a client, and that broker was going to make 70 grand. But what was more impressive is I heard about seller financing. The person buying it was borrowing the down payment, which I was like, that's interesting. And it was going to cash flow $5,000 a month. And they didn't have to put much money down. They were going to borrow it, and it was still going to cash flow 60 grand a year, which is more money than I'd ever made. So I started learning about all these things, and I asked, well, how does he get to do that? And he's like, well, he's going to borrow the down payment. And that deal didn't end up coming together for that individual, but it sparked a lot of ideas in the process. As that fell apart, I got pitched on buying it and borrowing the down payment, but that didn't happen. And so I ended up reading and studying. I read Deals on Wheels by Lonnie Scruggs, which is a great book. It's about micro transactions and lending on mobile homes. You pay cash, and then you seller finance it with a little down payment to the tenant. And you get some of your money back, and then a lot of interest payments because it's a high interest loan on a low amount. So I started learning about that, listened to a little audio book, a little disc that I plugged into my 1991 Miata. That was from Carlton Sheets.
Oh, nice.
And I was buying real estate, low to no money down, all the different ways that he knew of how. And most of those are still used today.
Yeah.
So I ended up just doing some research, and the fact that there was a broker that was selling that type of asset, didn't take money, didn't take a bank qualification, sparked a lot of interest. And I started doing a lot of research and eventually found my first deal on the MLS.
Man, I love that. It's kind of funny because in hindsight now, I realize like we hit the nail on the head. Like it was exposure, right? And I think it's funny because I see a lot of people, and age is only somewhat relative, but young, 19, 18, all the way up to mid 40s, some doing real estate, some not doing real estate. But the commonality is like, you have to know about it first. Well, if you want to buy duplexes, you have to know that there's a such thing as a duplex. If you want to, take a deal sub 2, you have to know like that's a thing. And so you're doing all these really cool things, and I'm getting to see the backside. And as you start telling your story, you're like, well, yeah, I found out about all this stuff. And then I started researching it, and then I started finding out more. You're talking about like seller finance. When I first started, I knew that people bought real estate, but I didn't even know like numbers had to work. Like I literally was like, oh, okay, that's easy. There's the MLS. You just buy property, right? It's like whoever has the most cash wins, and you just buy real estate. And then when I started putting like the business hat on, I was like, oh, never mind. This is a whole different game. Then I started learning more about finance, and it grew kind of like you, but the commonality is like knowing about something. So I think for our audience, it goes without saying, like, you got to put yourself out there. You got to seek knowledge to even, encounter knowledge. And that's exactly what you're saying you did. Would you agree?
Yeah. And my whole business has been built off of figuring out, number one, what is it you want? Who has it? And how do I get in the room with those people? So I ended up buying, and I did that on accident when I went to that real estate brokerage. These people had what I wanted, and so I learned from them along the way. And I found that to be true, and it's repeatable and simple. So the business model scaled, like we talked about a little earlier, to a couple hundred rentals, because what I did over and over is I would drive from Tacoma to Moses Lake, which is a 3 to 3.5 hour drive. And my Miata, before it exploded, the transmission blew up midway one time. But I would drive back and forth, and I would drive 6 to 7 hour commitment for a 15-minute meeting to learn from someone. So I'd cold call them, meet up with them, because I found that they owned a big roof on Google Maps. And I figured if it's a bigger roof, it's more likely to be multifamily than single family. And that ended up being true too. So I'd meet with them, we'll learn their story in a quick 10, 15, 20-minute conversation. And then I just keep in touch. And so it's all about learning from the folks who have what you want to have, because they've done it. They can teach you how to do it in the most efficient path possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you just born that way, or were you raised that way? Tell me a little bit about your upbringing, like what kind of shaped you to, have that light bulb moment. Because I think you say it as if it's kind of like common knowledge, but I don't think a lot of people think about that. Like you just said, you're like, it's simple and it's repeatable. Not a lot of people think to do that. I didn't even think to do that for a while until I started seeing other people do it. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, that makes sense.
I have, for the majority of my life, up until about 19, I was just a big introvert. I was afraid to talk to people. Imagine this 8, 9, 10-year-old kid with his mom at McDonald's, and you get the 4-piece because you say you're not that hungry, and then the kid tells their mom, hey, I'm hungry, and they're like, okay, here's $3, go order, and then they say, no, I don't want to. And I did that for most of my childhood, little things like that. If it was just an encounter of, I don't want to go talk to anybody, I'm afraid to talk to people. So I would just say, no, I'm not hungry anymore. So there was a breakthrough that had to happen at 19. If I didn't talk to people, I wasn't going to learn. I wasn't going to put myself in a position to make mistakes and grow. I had to just get out there and start talking with folks. So it wasn't anything to do with my upbringing. It was just a matter of, you're either going to grow or you're not, and you have to make the conscious decision to try. You don't got to do good, but you have to try. And so the way I practiced talking to people, I did a lot of studies on communication, and there's still a lot more to do. However, I practiced on Starbucks baristas, and the thought process was, I get to chat with guys, I get to chat with ladies, so I'm going to get exposure to both, how they interact. I'm never going to see them again because it's a high turnover job and there's different shifts. And I can just practice talking. And if it's awkward, which it was a lot of the time, I'll never see them again and they'll forget. And if it goes well, then I'm going to take whatever went well and try it again. And if that works well, I'm going to find a repeatable pattern. And so I practice with people I'll probably never see in my life again. Yeah. And that worked.
That's awesome, man. Such good insight. I love that. Do you still find yourself, like, even to today, because if I had to guess, like, I'm introverted too. Once an introvert, like always an introvert. So do you still consciously have to like put yourself out there, put yourself in places? Is it something you still practice, or is it sort of like in your subconscious now, just how you operate?
It's how I operate. I call it a social battery, but that's also a made up arbitrary thing too. I mean, everybody can coin their own thing for how their body reacts. I get tired of interacting with people after a certain amount of time, and then I go home. But I can get out there and chat, and I think the big key to why I've been able to do that is I never script anything. I don't edit anything. I just record it, or I just have the conversation. I don't prep. And so I'm not worried about, I have to say this, this, and this. If it comes up in the conversation, great. If it doesn't, that's okay too.
I love it. And it keeps things authentic and genuine, right? And I feel like the easiest conversation to hold with somebody is an authentic and genuine one, right? It's just kind of goes where it goes.
It is what it is. And there's a lot of skills that you can build out of building a business like that. The ability to wing everything. That's probably not the most it's not the most sophisticated model, but it can get you pretty dang far.
Sure.
If you practice it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Like you said, a repeatable process. So let's talk about that first deal, kind of like big picture, break it down on why you did what you did with it and how you were able to make it a success.
So it all started with that 22 unit, the 4, the 6, and the 12 that other person was doing. That was the intro to borrowing money and for a down payment, not partnering with the person who gives you the money, but borrowing at expensive rates. And so that started my studies on, okay, what is private money? What's a first lien? What's a second lien? What are good interest rates? How do you underwrite for cash flow? And the cash flow piece, I didn't have a stable income. I was a real estate agent and not a good one at that. I was making maybe $1,000 a month at the YMCA. I was coaching gymnastics. I wasn't making a ton of money. So I needed something that would cover itself in cash flow if I wanted to buy anything. The problem that I faced was I was looking at duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, because that's what that brokerage was tailored around. This is what you sell. You buy a bunch of these, you pay them off when you hit your income goal, and then you're financially free. And that's the whole model of that brokerage that's no longer around. Well, when I ran the numbers, if I was going to borrow the down payment, there was never enough income on a duplex, triplex, or fourplex to merit me borrowing at 12% interest on a down payment. I didn't even know where the 12% was going to come from yet, but I was looking at the deals trying to find an opportunity and I couldn't find it. So I ended up looking bigger because I thought back to that 22 and I just put on the MLS search, I was like, okay, I'm going to look up seller financing. Let's see what pops up. And there was some stuff that popped up. And the one that I ended up buying, it was a 12plex listed on the MLS. It was over 550 days it was on the market. So it wasn't the most ideal property, or at least I didn't know. But it was 3 quadplexes on one lot. So I was like, okay, well, if my brokerage says buy 1 quadplex, what about 3? But it was on one lot. And the thing I liked about it is it was $1.1 million. It had never gone pending on the MLS. So my thought process was, hey, no one's made an offer on it and gotten it accepted. So I'm just going to call them and try. There must not be anything wrong with the property. It's just nobody likes the location. So I called them up, got under contract. I did my research on that location. And getting under contract for the folks who are new is just you make an offer and everybody agrees to move forward with that offer. That's all it is. And so I had been underwriting, doing my practice on the numbers, focusing on cash flow. And that deal had a positive cash flow of a couple $1,000 a month after the mortgage, after the expenses. And they needed $112,000 down. So I did the math. I was like, well, if I borrow a little extra, I don't even know where the money's coming from yet. If I borrow 125 at 12%, 1% a month, that's $1,250. A couple thousand less $1,250, and I've got about $800 a month and change in free cash flow. That was the math I did. So then it came down to, okay, I got the deal, and then I got the debt lined up, which was $1,012,500 loan. And that was pretty crazy to me at 19. I was like, I'm going to indebt myself $1,012,500.
Instantly $1 million in debt.
Right. But I wasn't there yet because I had to figure out, okay, well, if I'm going to cash flow $800 a month net after everything, the debt payment, how do I pitch this to someone? And that was a fun adventure. I reached out to every broker in the office, including the owner of the brokerage, and said, hey, I've got this deal. It's similar to your model. It's 3 quads on one lot. It cash flows similar to that deal that this other broker was selling. It was even a similar location, only 45 minutes away. This is a good deal. It'll help you grow your PM business. I'd appreciate if you let me pitch it to your clients. And so many botched pitches later, there was one where I forgot the purchase price. I forgot the income. You did everything. I did everything wrong.
Yeah.
But I got practice and I made mistakes, which I could learn from. I got one yes. And that yes came from the pitch of, look, if I mess this up, your property management company, I'm going to do the work for the management, but it'll be in your guys' books. You're going to get that business. I'll sign over my ownership in the LLC, because I put in an LLC at that time, to the lender. Your client will make money. And I'm going to do my best to push the rents up over time so that they make even more money if I mess this up. but they lent me the money in second position, and it took 2 years to pay it off. Yeah, it was for 1 year, and then at the end of the year, I didn't have any money. Imagine that. So I begged them for an extension. I had to pay, some fees to extend that. Luckily, the property cash flow paid it, but I got the extension. And after that second year, I was able to pay them off, because at that point in time, I would have been 21, and I was in the 60 unit range, it was either 60 or 81. I was somewhere in there, and I had a little bit more ability to pay it off.
After you did that deal, you're like, hey, man, this at least somewhat works, right? Like, you haven't taken the deal full cycle, but
right.
Hey, somewhat works. You kept buying other deals, and somewhere along the line, one of those other deals provided you, whether you tapped into equity or whatever, provided you the ability to pay that lender off. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yeah. So I bought the 12-plex, and then 9 months later, so this would have been, I think it was June 30th of 2020, I bought my second 12-plex. And the first building I bought, if you can imagine, corner lot next to the church, close to Microsoft data center, right next to the school, brick buildings. That it was nice. Got a yard. Second building I bought was the ugliest building you could imagine. Looks like two brown tissue boxes next to each other. Doesn't even have flat roof. It's got a valley roof. But I bought it for almost half the price of the first one. And it didn't make that much less income. So it was a much bigger cash flow deal. And 9 months after that, I don't know why it was 9 month and 9 month, but I bought a sixplex. The same way, each time I was just pitching for money, and I got a little bit better because my credibility built up. And so I got the sixplex, and I bought that by myself. And I was super creative. I put it in Sixplex LLC, but that one cash flowed a little bit too. And no money out of pocket. And so I started building up this cash flow. And at that point in time, I met my business partner, and he had a duplex and a house. And I pitched him, hey, there's this duplex for sale right next to my sixplex. You should buy it. We'll be neighbors. And he bought it. He did the reno. He made a lot of money. He ended up selling that duplex and took that money. He partnered with me on my second 12-plex, and that money I used to pay off Quincy. So it was it was a roundabout way to do it. I moved it from, hey, I own this 12-plex by myself, to now I've got a partner. And eventually I bought him out again as I made more money. So now I own that 12-plex again by myself. But I took on a temporary partner to pay off a debt obligation, and I would do it the same way if I had to.
I love that. And that's one thing that, Cody, you kind of taught me, because a lot of what you do with real estate is done in the private equity world too, right? It's just business in general. But one of the things you taught me was, like, your decisions aren't permanent. A lot of people are like, read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Yeah, I'm going to buy a bunch of rentals and I'm never going to sell. Or, yeah, I'm going to buy a bunch of rentals and I'm going to sell. But either way, it's like, it's a definite one way or the other. And I hear you and you're like, man, I was taking one step at a time. Like, you didn't have any clue where you were going to get the money. You find the money. You have no clue how you're going to pay the guy off, but you're still taking action. And you're like, oh, okay, well, I'll sell equity here, take that cash, pay him off. And now you're in a partnership. But then later you ended up buying him out anyway to take control again. And you're just like changing your position, and you're cool being dynamic in your position on your assets. And that's the thing that you really taught me, is like, hey man, do what you got to do for now. Like, nothing's permanent. Like, maybe you stay partners in this 12-plex with another person forever. Maybe you eventually buy it yourself. Maybe you eventually sell it, put it into something else. Like, it doesn't really matter. Just do what you need to do for now and keep moving forward. That's what I hear. That's what I see from you.
And the key to that is not just doing what you have to do to survive, but it's putting yourself in a position where you've got long-term investments, so that when you survive, you eventually get a payoff. And that's the mistake most people make. They just do what they have to do. Like, they're going to wholesale their next deal to get through the next couple months, but they don't have anything to show for it after 2-3 years. on my rental, so I bought that first rental and it cashed at 800 a month, and today it's about 5,000 a month.
I love it, dude.
And that's one rental. I did what I had to do to survive, and now I have this long-term benefit because I got these long-term investments up front. And it's not about getting it at 19 or getting it at 30 or 40. When you're stacking your business, do your best to get something that'll have like a 5 to 10 year payoff, and then do everything you can to survive. Don't do the survival piece first if you can. It's like the debt snowball. I love the debt snowball. The problem is when most people do the debt snowball, all they have is a paid for credit card, a paid off house, which is not a bad thing, and they have a paid off car. It's a wonderful position, but you got to play offense before you play defense. So for folks that are trying to get started, try and get something like maybe get a couple duplexes. Now, if you do that snowball, you're actually going to have income for life, but you got to get those long-term plays established as early as possible.
Absolutely. I love that. I actually, maybe not 100%, but for the most part, I share that perspective with you. And I know a lot of people don't in the real estate world. I know there's a lot of weird strategies, a lot of weird things being said right now. But from my experience, one of the coolest things I learned was kind of what you just said. So initially I was like, man, do I want to build wealth? This is a whole like cash flow versus equity thing. Do I want to build wealth? Like, what am I trying to do? And I realized at one point, sometimes you can't do both. So with the same asset, sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. But you need to have a clear understanding of what you're trying to do. And so I put myself in a position where I was starving for cash, but I was buying assets. Fortunately, because I do other things, I had other things producing cash flow, so I didn't actually starve. And then once I got through that period, on the other side, I started seeing a lot of people who were only producing cash and had no assets start going under because they were just buying assets, selling, and they had a ton of cash. And then all of a sudden, through one of the cycles, 2022, the market shifts, market changes, and now their assets are valued at nothing, and they have no assets that they're holding to tap into. So they have what's left in the bank account. Some of them are in debt. They're just kind of screwed. Whereas for me, I sold what I could. I broke even on some stuff, but I still had these assets that I was buying, rental properties. I do single family, right? That I could have, if I needed to, tap into equity. So that taught me a valuable lesson unintentionally, because it was painful at first. I thought to myself so many times, like, what am I doing? Like, I'm dumping all my cash into like trying to build wealth, and I should be generating more cash, which is true to a certain extent. But ultimately, on the other side, now I'm where I'm at, and I'm like, man, thank God I was keeping a portion of my real estate. So, on average, if I do 4 deals a month, like 1 or 2 of them I'm going to keep. The others, I'm going to take that cash now, take a little bit of it, and then dump it into more deals because I can now. Before, I was having to live off some of that cash. So sounds kind of similar on your end, where you're like, man, I took care of the cash flow I needed to, and now I'm buying assets. I'm trying to be strategic. I'm trying to build for the future. Am I hearing that right?
That's very similar to my approach. All right, is there ever a point where you're focusing on bigger, better quality deals than just the volume game? I can't imagine trying to buy 4 deals a month.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a lot of work.
For me specifically with my company, I've sort of shifted through this whole process. So I'm saying this too. This is pretty recent. I mean, I'll say within the last probably 8 months, I've sort of changed my perspective to a certain extent. So what I've realized is I have these other business ventures that are actually producing real cash flow. So I'm not buying real estate for cash flow. I capture equity. Yes, it does cash flow because it has to. You can't buy a bad asset. Like, it has to cash flow. But I'm not like living off this cash flow. I'm capturing equity. So everything I'm doing with my single family is an attempt to capture equity. So like, if I'm going to buy something, I need at least 100K of equity to actually buy it, right? Then I'll refi out and I'll actually, tap into that equity. So when I do that, as I'm doing that, that's when I'm looking at trading up bigger things. But for right now, since I have the company built and we have deal flow, it makes sense just to kind of take those. But yes, I absolutely agree. Like from a wealth building standpoint, yeah, man, like the amount of work you put in that 12 unit for me early on is probably the same amount of work I put into a $50,000 deal, equity play deal, not cash, right? Like, and it cash flowed because I'm thinking around the same time. It cash flowed pretty good, like maybe $450, $500 a month, like true cash flow.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was a $50,000 house valued at $160,000, and after you do the rental and all that stuff, it was a lot of work, man. Probably the same amount of work you did for a $1 million+ asset, right? I mean, how many deals did it take? At what point did you become a millionaire? Like, how many units did you have to buy for that to happen?
It was my fourth deal.
Yeah, see, that's insane, dude.
But you got to look at it, the leverage, right? I mean, it's there's a different leverage point that I took to get there than some people would take to get there. I had 30 rentals here in Washington State, and it wasn't in an expensive market. The market I'm in now is pricey because the only thing trading is all the new stuff. So it seems more expensive than it used to. But when I bought my first 30 rentals, I was worth $400,000, somewhere in there. And as soon as I bought the 38 plex, which was my fourth deal, I took that on with a partner. That property by itself made me a millionaire. So it was, independent of the other stuff.
Yeah.
But the leverage and I had to find an opportunity that was in plain sight, and I had to sparkle that thing. That took a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of planning. Because on that business that I bought, the 38 units, 38 unit rent roll was $5,000 a month, not per unit, the rent roll. So you figure there's some issues going on.
Yeah. What was occupancy like?
Close to 100%.
Oh my goodness.
So you got to figure half of the building was occupied by a person with the same last name. It's all family. So they were living there for free. So we had to get them either on some sort of rent because they were living there for free. Some of them just left and ended up moving to the family because that family owns a really nice place down the street. And so some of them moved in there and around town. We didn't even have, we were going to work with them, but they just left. So we had to rent those out. But I didn't have a big rental budget. I borrowed the money for that down payment, we typically do, except for instead of doing it as a lien, because we had a clause in there, no further encumbrances. Encumbrances, you're just loading something up. So we couldn't load it up with debt. Took on 3 partners for $100,000 each. And then we were on the hook for the reno, me and my buddy. But we had a buyout with those people. So it was essentially debt. It was just structured as equity. And so our plan was, okay, we don't have a bunch of reno money. We can throw some fridges on a credit card. Let's go talk with everybody, see what they need. Some of them didn't have running water. That was bad. We got that fixed right away. Some of them didn't have a stove. So take out a credit card and buy some stoves and some fridges. And all of a sudden people start paying. So we take the income from $5,000. We were at like 10.5 to 11,000 the second month. I have it in Appfolio somewhere. And then we got the rent up to like 14,000 and then 17. And eventually we got it to 25,000. And so we got it up there, and then it took months. I mean, it was over half a year we were working on it, but we got our first bank loan. The problem was the bank didn't want to lend to us if we had all these partners because it was Christian and me, 20% each. And then we had 3 other people for $100,000 each that were 20%. So we called them up. We didn't have the money to fix the building and to buy them out. So those partners ended up seller financing out their ownership. So they took a note, and we make payments every month. And then we got to own it 50-50, which was amazing to think we had a 38 unit that was 50-50 at that age, because he was 29 and I was 21. So we just thought that was super cool. We didn't have to syndicate it. We just owned it. And we got the bank loan, pulled out a couple $100,000. I think we were like 250 to 300 back then. And we threw that into the building, made it nicer, pushed the value all the way up to 3.8 million from the 2 million we bought it for. We got a loan for 2.3 million, pulled out another, it was closer to 400 than it was to 3. And that was my second bank loan. So we refinanced it twice, paid some fees, and that is what it is. But got that second bank loan and pulled out close to 400 grand, put some more money in the building. We took it from concrete block, built it out, did installation and actual siding. So it looks like a much newer building now than the 1952 concrete block building it was. And then we paid ourselves a little bit. We actually put a little bit of money in the bank, which was the first time I saw 6 figures sitting in an account. And that was cool.
Oh man, I'm sure. I can imagine. And there were so many little gold nuggets you dropped in there. I was trying to keep up with them. One of the first things you said was, I think it was the original debt, because you guys threw debt on it first. There was a clause that said no other liens or encumbrances. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, and that was a contingency the seller wanted. The seller was old. If they took it back, they didn't want to have debt on it. Yep. And they were financing it, seller financing. So there's no further encumbrances. They wanted to protect themselves in case we mess up, because that was an asset that could have been messed up.
Of course. Which makes sense. Totally get it. But where there's a will, there's a way. So what did you actually end up doing? Recap that for our audience, because you found a way around it, right? There's
always a way around it to play within the rules. In that deal specifically, we set up our 38-plex LLC, and then there was 5 partners. It was me and Christian for number 2, and then we were the operating partners. And then we had 3 capital partners for 100,000 each. So we had 1, 2, 3, 300 grand. That was our down payment closing cost. And so we bought this thing with no money, and eventually they accepted a seller finance note. So we signed notes with them and got to own 100% of it. So we essentially financed it, except for they just took out notes with personal guarantee against that LLC. So it wasn't against the title.
Right. So it was basically, we can't do debt, can't throw debt on it. We'll sell equity and then turn that equity back into debt, basically. Right?
Yep. And you can convert debt to equity and equity to debt. There are taxable implications on all of that. But you do what you have to do, like we mentioned earlier, to get by. As long as you have the assets that'll do the long-term game for you. You pay extra taxes, whatever, you get through it. And one day, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years out, as long as the assets are cash flowing, which is the most important piece, you can get to the finish line.
One question that comes to mind for me is, again, where there's a will, there's a way. I can tell, man, you are straight entrepreneur, such a problem solver. You're just like, well, if this doesn't work, well, let's go this way. If this doesn't work, let's go this way. And it sounds like what I hear is a lot of times you don't overthink it. Like, I know a lot of people, even me, I do this too. Sometimes we'll succumb to fear, right? We're like, oh, I really want to do this thing. And then you start thinking about it and you're like, but where am I going to get the money? And then if I get the money, how am I going to pay him off? And then what am I going to do? Right.
Right.
But I don't hear that in your thought process. You took, like, even on that first deal, you took out that debt with no plan to pay them, to the point that you actually had to extend, which no issues there. Right. Like, man, all we have is our reputation. You had to extend, doesn't really matter, because you ended up paying it off. Like, you owned it. You figured it out. You paid it off. Like, that says a lot about you. What is your thought process, man? Do you have these fears? Do you not have these fears? How do you work through it when especially as you're buying bigger and bigger things, man?
Yeah, there's been sad days and sleepless nights, and the key piece to why this all works, because there have been times where I've wanted to just quit, just like, oh, screw it, sell the stuff, pay the taxes, have a little bit of money in the bank, do the Dave Ramsey route. I've thought about that. I've gone through most of my life just trying to push the ball down the field. If you think about like a soccer reference, you just got to get the ball closer to the goal. And we're going to aim for the goal wherever it's at. If it moves, then we'll aim somewhere else. However, we just got to push the ball down the field. There's nothing else we can really do. And I used to be super stressed about everything as a kid. Anybody in my family will tell you that if you ask them. what did he do? And he's a kid. He was always just stressed out about stuff. They called me a worrywart. And it just did, that was my childhood. And now if I can't control it or influence, I'm not going to stress over it. I've spent a lot of time trying to meet with people that are a lot farther than me, and they put it in perspective when times are tough. And they just say, you just got to keep moving forward to the best of your ability. And the more mistakes you make, the more you're going to learn. Try and make mistakes, small mistakes as early as you can, and get big enough so when you make a bigger mistake, it's okay. But I made mistakes in partnerships and all that. You just got to keep pushing forward and can't worry about things you can't control or influence. Otherwise, you're going to break and you're going to just quit.
That's so true. I feel like I've embraced that more and more this past year than any other year. I journal. So I look in my journal and I see that my attitude sort of changed in things that I'm not stressing about now. I'm like, whatever, are like so huge compared to where they were 2 years ago. And 2 years ago, I was stressing so much. So I see growth in that. So yeah, man, I appreciate that. That's really good word there. So you'd mentioned the goalpost, and then earlier you had talked about aligning your strategy and what you're doing with your vision. What is your vision? Like, where's Cody headed? What influences why you invest the way you do, and where are you looking forward to?
So I see a lot of benefit in owning stuff by yourself amongst owning some stuff in partnerships. And so my vision for the future is to continue to build the personal holdings, to grow the liquidity. A big message that I've tried to share with everybody is you have to manage your options, things you can do, with your obligations, things you have to do. And building the business that I built, I took on quite a few obligations. One of the biggest ones was for the Robin Hood Resort. We bought a resort because we thought we were rich enough to buy one, and then we found out we weren't.
Okay.
And
what do you mean by that?
My buddy Christian and I, we bought 100 plus rentals in a year together.
Wow. Okay.
It was a fun year. We were buying a deal every month, if not more than that.
Wow.
And they were all multifamily. We don't buy single family or duplexes. We were buying multifamily, typically 5+ unit deals. Mm-hmm. So we were buying a deal every single month. One of them was 38, one was a 24, one was a 30. We picked up some stuff, and we took on obligations to buy the Robin Hood Resort because we thought, hey, we're invincible, and when we're rich enough to own this. And it makes me think about when someone gets their first commission check and then they go buy a car that's a little too nice, right? I mean, we bought an asset for $4.5 million in an asset class we didn't know. And so my vision moving forward is to get out of the business models that I really have no business being in. I'm a multifamily guy. I'd like to get in development. I'm not rich enough to get into development yet. A lot of people get in too soon, and they're risking way more than they know. So I'd like to keep pushing out of the obligations I took on for those different assets, push a little bit deeper into the buy and hold multifamily. And then when I get a little bit wealthier, transition into more of the Class B plus, Class A development, and being able to do that without having a partner that I have to look to, being able to do that by myself.
Do you see yourself doing like build to rent to yourself?
Yeah.
By yourself? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple people that I've looked up to, one of them's building about 100 units right now. Someone else, they just built a ton of townhomes. They're 7plexes. And I think there's 26 total 7plexes getting built right now that he's doing. I'd like to be able to get to that level and do it without the partnerships.
Will you keep debt on that, or will you work to pay it off? I'm not trying to think too far to the future, but I'm trying to get an idea where your head's at. Like, do you eventually see yourself not only owning these assets, but like also paying them down and not being super high leveraged or anything like that?
Yeah, I think respecting debt's a huge thing.
Okay.
So there's definitely going to be a point where I debt hammer my stuff. I pay down the debts, but it's not going to be in the traditional sense where, hey, I just take a little bit of cash flow and I throw it at the mortgage every month. Because every time you pay down the mortgage a little bit at a time, you increase your risk and you decrease the seller risk. Someone's holding the bag at the end of the day. And so I want to keep the risk off of me for the longest point possible till I can write a check for the debt. So the model that I've found to be the best for paying off properties is, let's say I owe 400 grand on one of my sixplexes. It's like 390 something. If I wanted to pay that off, I would just go do a value add deal. Let's say I go buy a 20plex. I could push the value up $1 million. Instead of levering that million in equity to the max, I'll pull out 400. And to do that, I'm going to have to boost maybe the occupancy, boost the rents. You're not really decreasing expenses today, and that's not a thing typically on most deals of that size. So I'm just going to have to boost the net income on it, borrow the money out, and then write a check for the sixplex. The debt that I took on is now covered by the new net income. I have a free and clear sixplex, and for asset protection, I'd throw a line of credit against that. Stuff like that. That's what I've learned from people farther than me, and there's probably a better way to do it, but that's the most efficient path I've found, because you can do that process start to finish in about a year. You do it in 18 months. You do the value add in the first 12 to 18 months. You refinance it, work on pulling the money out. And if you can't pull the money out, maybe rates are up, you just keep your existing loan with an increased cash flow.
Absolutely. Sounds like you have a phased approach, right? And you're adjusting risk along the way. I like that. I'm a fan of debt, right? But at the same time, I have the experience that I have. And I think that I'm a fan of debt because of the phase that I'm in with real estate. I'm talking to real estate specifically, right? That's helpful for scaling. If you're not looking to scale and you're looking more so for like certainty and to sleep better at night and heavier cash flow, maybe you want to pay some of that debt off, to each their own. But I love what you laid out there, because it's a phased approach to get to where you want to go. You're not like absolutely on one side of the fence or the other. You're like, I'm going to use debt when I need to use debt. I'm going to clean it up when I don't.
Yeah. Right. And you can always reborrow, right?
Yeah.
Dave talks about that on his things. Like, if you pay off your house, if you're really urgent to get back in debt, you can go get another mortgage. What I will encourage folks, though, that are listening, if you're going to scale, which a lot of people, because of bigger pockets and people online that aren't, most people put on a facade that shows them doing better than they really are. And so if you're going to just scale because you want to scale, my encouragement would be you can get your assets that are a little bit smaller. You get your quads, your 8s, your 12s, your 20s, and try and stack your business in a way where you're only borrowing against your biggest assets, because your biggest assets are going to be the most stable, and the bigger the loan you can get, the better the terms you're going to get. You're going to get a better term on a $20 million loan than you will on a $200,000 loan, without exception. There's some people like the 30-year AM, fixed rate on a duplex, triplex, fourplex, but you will get more flexibility on bigger loans, on income producing real estate. So try and stack your business would be my encouragement, where if you're going to pay anything off, you lever against the big stable assets. You don't over lever them, but you lever against those and use that money to potentially pay off your smaller stuff. So you have a sense of stability on your indebted assets, and your free and clear assets are going to be your smaller ones, which are really easy to offload or lever if you need to.
Absolutely. And you can, depending on how you're financed on them and everything like that, you can do it in onesies and twosies, right? Which is one of the big challenges of people that buy a bunch of multifamily or single family, and then they throw a portfolio loan on it. Well, it's like, now they've just encumbered the whole portfolio, and it's not easy to break that apart from a finance standpoint, right?
Right. That
was one of the things that I learned. So that's really cool that you said that, man. I That's awesome. So you talked about the resort. What's been not necessarily like your biggest deal, but your most favorite deal so far of everything that you've done, the 200 plus units?
My favorite purchase was the Ugly Duckling. It was my second 12-plex, and I own that today by myself. I ended up buying the 15-plex across the street from it, and I spent 5 years trying to buy that. It was 7.5% down seller finance for the 15-plex across the street. It was awesome. It was fun, but my favorite deal was the 12-plex next to that. I bought it back in June of 2020, the Ugly Duckling, the one where I got my partner to buy into it, eventually bought him out. I took that from the tissue box shape with the valley roofs, the butterfly roofs. I ended up getting it engineered, put trusses on it, added laundry facilities. I've renovated 11 out of 12 apartments there since purchasing it. I renovated some of the apartments while the tenants were living there so that they had a better space. Added fencing, replaced the water heaters, added insulation so that utility costs go down. I've done a lot of stuff there. Redone most of the plumbing for the bathrooms, all new shower valves, new toilets, new vanities, all that, new cabinets in some of them. It's been my favorite turnaround project. You don't always get to buy the cream of the crop when you're getting started. My first property ever was this. I went from buying this place in Quincy, which was on the MLS for, let's see, come on. So you can kind of see here, right? It was a much nicer setup of building. Same age, but a lot prettier. You got the landscape, you got the walkways, the in-ground sprinklers, the nice parking. I got off-street parking in the back. There's laundry rooms. Then I went and bought this. So I ended up rebranding this, and I'll show you a photo of what it is now. Let's see, Marina Shore Apartments.
Yeah, with those new roofs and everything, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So new roofs, came in, renovated. I've since put on handles. Don't worry. They have handles in the kitchen. But it's a much nicer complex. And this rented for $11.25, which is pretty mind-boggling to me. Let's see if I have exterior.
Did you say some of those? I think you said some of those were at like $550. Did you say some of them were as low as $550
to $600? Let me see if I can find a.
Gosh.
Can I find? So this is another unit. This just rented for $1,050 in here. Not as nice as that other one. I didn't get professional photos taken. I usually do because it's if you want to stand out in a small town, take professional photos.
That's good.
Let's see, 1065 West Marina. I want to find a photo of, there it is. So this is before I did some more reno, but I ended up putting pitch roofs on it.
There
so
you
you
go.
can. Oh, there we go.
Completely different. That looks so much better. So much better.
Since then, I redid all the rockscape. I ended up putting in a patio, put in new fences. It's been a fun transformation. And over the course of 2.5 years, I was able to double the asset value. Did
you tap into that equity? Do you plan to tap into that equity? What did you do after that?
Oh yeah. So I tapped that equity a lot. So I used to owe, I bought it for $680. It was $120 down seller financed. So I owed $560 to seller, $120 to the lender for the down payment. So $680 debt. I got the rents up a little bit over time. Someone would leave. I'd take the rent from $550, $600 up to $700, $725. And I struggled to get that rent, but I got it leased. And it took the extra little income and tried to make it nicer over time. And I then went to a hard money lender that was local to Seattle area. I said, hey, look, I pushed the rents up a little bit. I got a plan. But in order to get a bank loan on this, I need to do a new roof because the butterfly roof had tarps on it, roof tarps. It didn't leak, but it had 5 layers of tarps from decades. It was kind of a slumlord situation from prior ownership. I got a hard money lender on board to give me a loan for all the fix up. So I got the building repainted. I got trusses engineered, spent 6 figures on that roof because it's 2 side-by-side buildings. They were pretty big. And I completely changed that asset. And as soon as that happened, I got the rents up to an average over $800 from the $600 and the $700 that they were at. Pushed the value up north of $1,400,000 on appraisal. I got a loan for $900,000, which knocked out my $680,000 and the money I borrowed out for the roof. And I ended up actually being able to pull out enough money to buy a 10-plex. I bought a 10-plex about a mile away that was seller financed as well. So that 12-plex ended up buying out, or it bought the roof, and then it bought the 10-plex down the street, which cash flowed $3,000 a month, which helped pay for the new payment on the 12. And I kept making the asset nicer over time. You could drive by it if you ever come visit us here in Moses.
Yeah, I will for sure.
But
I'm going to come out there. I want to see all your stuff.
We can do that. It'll take a day, but yeah, we'll drive by the properties. And I just released one of those units. Someone left, and I released the unit for $1,125. So I've been pushing those rents up quite a bit. I've still got some people that are at the $825, $850 mark, the original tenants. I'm not taking them all the way to market. It could go above $1,000. I just re-rented another one for $1,050, but I'm keeping them where they're at because I've still got, I think I've got 4 original tenants there. So they're still in the 800 range, but everyone else is higher than that. And because I've been able to get those higher rents, I called my lender and said, hey, I've got this 15-plex across the street. I need $75,000 for the down payment. And so they gave me an $85,000 second. This is the bank behind their $900,000 first. That way I didn't have to refinance the first, pay the prepayment penalty. They gave me the cash. So in addition to buying the 10-plex, which I eventually sold, I got to get more money to buy the 15, and the asset's worth somewhere around $1,500,000 today. So I've got a good equity position. It's not the best, but it's decent, $500,000 position. And I got to buy the 15-plex on the bank of that 12-plex. The way I find owners, because they're not sellers, they're owners, is I look for big roofs. So I click here, say, okay, 2829 West Marina. I'll go to the local county assessor site. I'll put that address in, figure out who owns it, and everybody's phone number is free on Google. That's why I'm not worried about hiding what properties I own or my phone number, because someone can do a quick Google search and see everything I own.
So glad you said that.
It is what it is, right? So
I get these arguments all the time, and I'm like, guys, I find people. Like, it's very, very easy.
Yeah.
That's what I do.
Yeah. I messaged Jordan Belfort. There's people out there that are so big, and they have tons of assets, and you can still find their phone number because it's linked to their Facebook or their Instagram, and all that information is public. And a good resource for that, though, once you find out what LLC owns it or who owns it, Open Corporates is a site that I use. Open Corporates, you can put in their name and their state, and it'll show you every LLC they own in that state. If you put in the LLC, it'll show who owns that. And maybe an LLC owns it. And so then you put in that LLC, and you just keep going until you find it. But everybody's info is public.
Thread by thread by thread. I love that. And I love that you corrected me there too, because that's some perspective for you, right? I said sellers. You said, well, they're not sellers, they're owners. Like, yeah, it's a different perspective. They're owners. Approach them that way, right?
Right.
So really cool. I love that you did that. Do you think much about your beliefs? Is that something that you consider?
That just the beliefs around the real estate, or what?
Life in general, but especially real estate. Here's my thought. The stuff that you're doing, a lot of people are held back. I mean, shoot, some of the things that I hold myself back from, it's not just that, I get caught up in fear, this, that, whatever, but like, it's that a belief does not exist that like I could do it or I could figure it out. Right. Like, but you just seem to have that, it sounds like you're constantly doing new things. You're constantly doing different things. And the easiest thing to believe in is something you've done before. The hardest thing to believe in is something you've never done. So how are you constantly doing things you've never done? Like, where do you think that belief comes from?
Well, my whole business has been built off of, again, like I mentioned earlier, this is the key for everybody. You have to figure out what you want, who has it, and how do I get in the room with those people? I've been told again and again by people that are worth tens of millions more than me that this is what you do. You build the business based on cash flow with the intent to grow the value. And if all your purchase is cash flow and they are able to cash flow with margin, it's not just about, I cash flow $100 with $1,000 mortgage. It's like, I've got margin. If my mortgage is $1,000, maybe my cash flow is $500, after all the expenses. Now I've got that margin and that cushion there. If you do that with the intent of, like you mentioned, capturing equity, and you do that over a long period of time, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, you'll become very wealthy. And so if I have a question on a business thing, I'm like, what do you think about this? This is how I underwrote this business model. They're like, well, I would tweak this one piece. Or if I run out of money, which happens for most real estate people, I call them up. It's like, hey, what would you do? I'm feeling stuck. And then they either give me good advice or bad advice, and I get to discern whether I think it's good or bad advice. And I've gotten both. Sometimes it's bad advice. Yep. They're like, well, you should just sell your assets and try. It's like, no, that goes against what you said the first time. So, people's perspective will change as they grow, but getting that perspective along the way is what allows me to make decisions.
I love it. I love it, man. I hear, you didn't say this, but I hear like borrowed belief. Like,
it is.
I go to them and they've done it. I see that they've done it. They're telling me how to do it. So wow, I believe them. And I kind of think about that. And one of the more challenging things I did was when I really started like marketing, like spending tens of thousands of dollars marketing, right? Because unlike buying a piece of property, you don't owe anything. So if you do it wrong, that money is gone. Like you expect a way better return than, just buying a piece of property. But if it's gone, if you do it wrong, man, it's gone, right? And so I looked at other people and I was like, well, they're doing it. They're saying it works. Like, okay, I'm in. I'm just going to listen and follow and do it. And then when I saw it work, I'm like, okay, it works. And it built belief over time. So I hear a similar thing from you.
Yeah, it's how I got started. It's how I continue to grow. I just had an owner meeting with someone and they're worth 8 figures, soon to be multiple 8 figures. And I'd run into them for years, never would have known. And we started talking business.
Wow.
He gave me some advice on some of my stuff, which is super helpful. But networking with people in the space and trying to figure out where they're coming from, not taking advice from someone who's worth $1 million, but taking advice from someone who's worth north of 5 to 10, someone who's been seasoned, because someone could go win the lottery or get a crypto pump and get $1 million. It doesn't mean you should listen to them, right? But someone who's been in the business for a while. And
yeah, dude. I love that you said that. I love that you said that because that resonated with me. When I first started getting into real estate, there's an investor, a friend of mine that had been investing, I don't know, maybe 3 years prior to me. And they're telling me to do all these things. And I'm like, okay, cool. I kind of see it working. And then as I start doing it, I'm like, I don't know. Like they were talking about long-term rental strategy and it just had hundreds of single family, or not hundreds, 100 single family rentals. And I kind of stopped and I was like, well, man, check it out. You've invested 2017, 18, 19. We're in 2020 now. You don't have the test of time. So like what you're saying, I hear you, but like, I'm going to go talk to this other person that was investing since 2012. And then I started getting different advice. And I think that was one of the kind of like aha moments for me, because the way that I kind of looked to this person at that time was maybe not how I should have. And considering that was huge for me. So the fact that you just said that, like, yeah, man, I'm not talking to the guy that's at $1 million, 2 million, done this once or twice here and there. Like I'm looking for like people that are like ahead of me and have the test of time on their strategies and stuff like that. I think that's so smart.
Yeah. And if they've been doing it for 3 years, if all their advice is just being relayed from someone that's been doing it for 20, great.
Sure.
Most of my advice, and some of it comes from my experiences, but most of it comes from my interactions with these people that have been doing it for 40 to 50 years, longer than all the people on the internet, right?
Yeah.
So my advice is coming from a young perspective, but it's a spin off of people that have been doing it for longer than I've been alive times two.
Yeah. I love it. 40-year-old advice from, 20 years of experience, 20 plus years of experience. Yeah, that's cool, man. I love it. I think it's so cool too. Like the way you broke it down, like for our audience, man, you're like, just find people doing it. And then I try to figure out how I'm going to get around them. And I get around them and then I listen to them and ask questions. And such a cool thing, dude.
It's the way to play it. But you don't have to start with Class A. You don't have to start with Class B, C. You can start wherever you can get your start. But the main thing is based on cash flow for equity growth and have long-term fixed rate debt. You do that, you can grow.
The horizon for you, aside from your lovely wedding, and where our listeners can connect with you, see your YouTube channel, catch up with you, things like that.
Well, my YouTube is Cody Davis Business Adventures. I've never been good with names. I had Sixplex LLC, Tequila, Sevenplex LLC, So my YouTube is just, I post a video every Tuesday and Thursday on my business adventures. And the goal is to help people speed along in theirs. Awesome. And hopefully make their own mistakes and not make the ones I've made. I encourage people to make mistakes, but don't make ones that you've seen other people make. That would be unintelligent. So I post there twice a week, every single week. So that means I got to record a video today. But the nice thing is I never edit. So I just film it and post it.
There you go.
It's easy. But yeah, check it out there. I can engage anybody there. And I appreciate you having me on. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, man, of course. It was great. Good conversation. Man, I learned a ton. I know our audience is going to learn a ton listening to this. Thank you so much for coming on, man. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. You bet.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. Until next time.